The Dallas Cowboys are making roster moves to fix their run defense. We'll tell you what those moves are on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, including, is it time for a change in the wide receiver room? And do the Cowboys need to change their philosophy on offense? But Landon, right before we jumped on the show, the Cowboys made a huge roster move. I mean, not actually huge, but the player they moved was huge. They put Jordan Phillips on the injured reserve list with a wrist injury. That means he'll miss at least the next 4 games. And they've signed old friend alert Carlos Watkins from the Washington Commanders practice squad. Let's just break these down. Let's start with Jordan Phillips. Do you I don't want to say, do you think this was a real injury, but how big of a loss is it to not have Phillips?
Again, we're going to do the physically large joke again, because physically large, I think you're losing probably 350 pounds off of your roster.
Yes.
It's not a big loss. Jordan Phillips was absolutely atrocious on Sunday. I don't want to go into hyperbole, but I would say that if I was to make a all-time start list of all-time terrible games by Cowboys players, he would make the roster for defensive tackle, I think, in that game. I mean, that was all-time Cowboys bad, I feel like. Yeah. And so they replaced him with the guy that obviously Cowboys fans are familiar with, a guy that I think, I really loved his time here. I thought that he was an incredibly scrappy player who works hard. And I think that it's a situation where, he's coming off of the Washington practice squad. And I think that, obviously that's where you're pulling guys off of, unless you're pulling them from the street. But Jordan Phillips was also coming off the Giants practice squad practically. I mean, the Cowboys, basically got him before he was about to be cut. So, is it going to be an improvement here? I think that remains to be seen. I haven't watched Carlos Watkins lately, so I don't know what the state he's in. But I was a big fan of his play when he was with the Cowboys. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they had to do something here. Like the current rotation of defensive tackles that they had between Linval Joseph, Jordan Phillips, and Mozzie Smith wasn't cutting it. And obviously Mozzie's going to get the longest leash here. And he should. He was the best defensive tackle on Sunday. And I know that bar is not high to clear, but they needed something different. And I think when you start to play a lot of these more wide zone offenses, Landon, you have to have some guys that can either be really stout against the run or that are athletic enough to kind of play down the line. And Jordan Phillips just wasn't either of those.
Yeah, and for Carlos Watkins, I think he's a guy that when he was playing for the Cowboys, I think he played a little bit of 1, a little bit of 3. He's definitely more of like an undersized 1. So I think if the role is to be a run stopping 3 technique, I mean, again, I haven't seen him play in the last 2 years, so
he hasn't played a lot.
Yeah.
So last year he played with the Cardinals. Remember, he signed after the 2022 season with the Cardinals. Yep. 43 snaps that season. And then this year, only 3 snaps with the Commanders. So he has not played a lot since leaving Dallas.
I kind of feel like I remember him playing against the Cowboys in week 2 last year. After that.
That's it. That's the last time he played.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. So, then I guess I saw him the last time he played. So, yeah, I mean, I think he played pretty decently in that game, if I remember correctly. But obviously, he's a little bit longer in the tooth. And these teams that he's gone to, when he went to Washington, I mean, look at their depth chart at defensive tackle. They've got 4 really solid young defensive tackles. So obviously there wasn't a ton of room there. And he went to Washington, clearly because of his familiarity with Quinn and that sort of thing. So I just think that, it's one of those things where you've got to do something, like, even if Jordan Phillips was healthy, which, I mean, whatever, I mean, you were going to have to find a way to replace him. You cannot put that back on the field.
No.
Right. Like, and the problem is that you really had 3 defensive tackles that were kind of all playing at that level in a certain way. Phillips, probably the worst of them. So really all you've done is just kind of replace part of the issue that you've got there. But I mean, I would say that at least they're doing something, at least something's being done. To put my 2 cents in here, I don't know if I believe the wrist stuff. I mean, again, I'm not saying that
he had off-season wrist surgery, but I gotta believe it's like your wrist
that's
hurts,
very
right?
Yeah. I mean, it just had a physical too, right? Like, so
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it feels like a very convenient reason to stash him away, like you said, maybe to get him back into shape. But either way, to get him off the field, because you just simply can't. It's just like yesterday we were talking, and someone was saying like, "Oh, I was saying I would take Justin Rogers back," and they're like, "Oh, well, we'll check in 3 years to see how that works out." And I'm like, I don't care about 3 years. I think Justin Rogers, the rookie 7th round pick, could be better than the guys that were out on the field on Sunday. That's how bad the defensive tackle play was on Sunday.
They also looked old. And this is what happens when you have a Jordan Phillips who's older, Linval Joseph, who's like 34, 35 years old. Like, they looked old. Now, Carlos Watkins, again, another older player. He'll turn 31 in December. But again, not as old. Somebody, as we were doing this podcast, Landon, they retweeted my last tweet on Carlos Watkins from 2023. This was the day that he signed with the Texans. My tweet was, I thought Carlos Watkins really bailed the Cowboys out in the final 6 games or so of the 2022 season. He played a really important part of their interior defensive line. That's all they need. They don't need him to be a starter. They don't need him to be a high functioning backup. Just be a solid rotational player and give you even slightly below average defensive tackle play would be a massive win compared to what we saw last week.
Yeah, something approaching replacement level,
yes,
like, would be nice. I mean, that's why this is not a high bar for us to stand in. Like, and it really, any new defensive tackle probably would have made me thrilled at the situation.
And that's the point. Like, I think they're going to churn these guys until they can find adequate play.
Yeah, and again, Watkins served as the kind of Jordan Lewis role in the 22 season, where he showed up sort of seemingly out of nowhere at the end of the season to really, really help the Cowboys when they needed him. So, if he could just be a solid part of a rotation at 3 technique, I mean, I'm not even asking for sacks or anything, just a solid early down guy who's not getting his butt kicked on rundowns. I think that's a solid pickup for the Cowboys.
I'm going to give you a fake line from FanDuel. I want you to pick over under 7.5 defensive tackles that'll play at least a snap for the Cowboys this year.
Are we including the ones that have already played?
The ones that have already played, yes.
Oh, then I'm taking over.
I think they're going to churn these guys constantly until they can find something that sticks.
Yeah, I mean, they've already played 3 guys. They added a 4th. I have to imagine that that they'll probably continue to churn that thing.
Yeah. All right, let's get to your mailbag questions, including, is it time to move on from Jalen Brooks? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day foods, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. Listen, I go to a lot of football parties, and there's nothing more depressing than going to a party and seeing that there's a very lackluster spread or no food at all. But that's why DoorDash is here to save us. You can order all of your game day favorites like pizza, burgers, wings, all from the comfort of your couch. Again, you don't even have to miss a play. Just pull up the app, pick what food you want, and have it delivered right to your house. Use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's the only sportsbook that I use when I place my game day bets, including the Cowboys now 1.5-point underdogs at home against the Ravens. That's very, very interesting. But we've got something a little bit different for you this week. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions. On tomorrow's show, we've got a crossover show with Locked On Ravens previewing that game for you. And then on Friday, Landon and I back to break it all down. Cowboys, Ravens, week 3. Make sure you tune in for that. But Landon, let's answer some Twitter questions. This first one is, I don't want to say it's an overreaction, but we should talk about it. Is it time to consider benching Jalen Brooks for somebody like Ryan Flournoy? This question comes from @Lord_Dilly.
Yeah, I understand the thought process here. I mean, obviously Brooks had a very bad game. The interception. Obviously, there was a couple different issues with blocking, which is, kind of the reason that he's out there, to be honest. I would also caution that Brooks is a young player, and that he hasn't had a ton of experience out there. He got some experience last year and he's getting a little bit more this year. I don't think that we should just quickly give up on this kid. He's the reasons that we're excited about Flournoy are sourced out of what we saw from training camp and his performance in training camp of the preseason. Those are all the same reasons that we were excited about Brooks. And frankly, Brooks did more than Flournoy throughout the training camp.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I don't want to see Flournoy or that I'm not interested in seeing him get an opportunity. I just think that Brooks has done a lot to earn his opportunity. And I don't think I want to quite get ready to throw it away now. Now, that isn't to say if they can't find a way, maybe somewhere else to have a guy down to bring Flournoy up and give him opportunities, I'm on board with that. But I just think that Brooks provides something for you that, if you could get him to be a little bit more reliable, would be a valuable asset to your offense. And he has consistently in training camp proven to be a good player who can, elevate above the competition and provide solid snaps. I don't think I want to, and special teams, right? And I don't think I just want to throw that away because of one bad game of a young player early in the season.
I understand. He did not have a good game at all in week 2. I'm also not opposed to the Cowboys just limiting the number of snaps he's on the field, whether that's just leaning more on CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Jalen Tolbert. If it means more 12 personnel, maybe more 21 personnel, just to limit the number of snaps that he's out there. Because again, he is a young player. I do think he'll bounce back, but I understand this is a tough matchup this week against Baltimore secondary. If you're going to move on, and that's the wrong word, if you want to bench Jalen Brooks, I don't know if Ryan Flournoy is the answer yet, because it's probably going to be a lot of the same problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flournoy is as raw or more raw than what Jalen Brooks is, right? And you're probably going to get a lot of the same issues in terms of not finishing blocks, not necessarily being in the right spot, slipping, not reading zone coverage the same way Dak is. If you want a more reliable receiver, it's probably Kelvin Harmon, who is stashed on your practice squad, but he doesn't give you a lot of upside either. I would rather develop the young guys. So it's not a great situation to be in. I kind of hope they just figure out ways to limit the snaps this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that has been in games previously before and performed well,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like this is a situation where we've never seen him like the lights are too big for him. We've never seen him do this in a pro game. Like he had a couple of really great snaps last season and when he got opportunities last year as well. So I just think that, yeah, like I'm all for getting Flournoy opportunities. I just don't think that necessarily has to be at the expense of Brooks, and I also think that I want to continue to give Brooks opportunities because I think Brooks is on his own trajectory to be a solid player. So I'm just not ready to kind of, I'm for the part of seeing more Flournoy. I'm positive for that. I don't want to like necessarily fade Brooks because I think he does some things on this offense that will be helpful if you can get him to be more reliable.
I also want to just quickly talk about Jalen Tolbert in this game because Jalen Tolbert actually had the best receiving day of his career. But there's another part of Tolbert's game that is severely lacking, and it's his ability to block. I mean, there were, and I charted these when I was watching the game. There were 4 times where he missed a block that could have made a run go for another 3 or 4 yards. And this is kind of like secretly one of the keys to like a Kyle Shanahan offense is your wide receivers are going to block and they have to block well or else they're not going to get on the field. And the motto around the receivers is no block, no rock, right? Mm-hmm. So Jalen Tolbert, I thought, really struggled as a blocker. And I think that's why Jalen Brooks is getting on the field a lot because he is a better blocker. However, he missed a really big block on the Brandon Cooks reverse that probably cost them 4 points. So it's all just a mess at the bottom of this roster.
Yeah, I mean, again, like he's just a more physical player than Tolbert is. I think he has some dog in him for sure. Like just based on what we saw at the end of training camp, like it felt like there were times when he was getting frustrated and he was trash talking guys like Diggs and making plays in some of these 7-on-7. So I think he has some of that in him. I just think. And I think this offense needs that, like you said. I mean, and this offense has traditionally had guys like that. Like, I mean, look, I just saw a clip of Simi Fehoko posted yesterday with some of the blocking he's done with the Chargers. The Cowboys have traditionally had good blockers at wide receiver. It's been something that they emphasize a lot. So I think that, having Brooks out there is important, giving him another opportunity, another chance. I think that's something that they should do. But again, I'm not at all opposed to getting Flournoy some opportunities to see what he does. And if he, really shines, then I think you give him more opportunities. And then at that point, I'm okay with giving it at the expense of Brooks if he really comes out there and shows you something.
And I just looked at the PFF grades, and I understand PF grades are not the end-all be-all, but Jalen Tolbert has the 5th worst run blocking grade in the NFL, and Brandon Cooks has the 10th worst. So, like, 2 of your 3 receivers are well below average blockers. Yeah. It probably is not a surprise that they're not busting off a lot of big runs because they're just not getting anything from the wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think that's why, getting a guy like Jalen Brooks more chances, maybe in some more 12 personnel stuff when you're running the football and you need those guys kind of being a little bit. I mean, you need it 11 personnel because you have less people to block, but I think maybe that's where you find the opportunities for Brooks is in kind of some of those bigger run personnel packages early in the downs or whenever you need to run the ball, and that's just more opportunities for him to kind of use his skill set. Because again, that wasn't a good indication of his blocking skills. He is a good blocker. That was just a bad mistake he made on that play and that other one.
All right, Landon, let's talk about the Cowboys' offensive philosophy and if they should consider maybe a move in 2025 and beyond. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Listen, I absolutely love Gametime. It's the only app that I use when I want to go buy tickets for live events such as football games, concerts, theater events near me. Just use Gametime to purchase tickets for Jacksonville, Buffalo, Monday Night Football. Cannot wait. Gametime makes it so easy to buy your tickets. They have a new feature called Gametime Picks where they filter out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. I love that you can get a view from your seat before you buy so you know, like, hey, are the goalposts going to be in my way? Am I going to be able to see the field from these seats? It's absolutely fantastic. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions, and we got a lot of really good ones. But this final question here comes from Preston. He wants to know, should the Cowboys consider hiring someone from the Shanahan tree like Clint Kubiak in 2025 and beyond? Do they need to have a change in philosophy on offense?
Here's the thing about philosophy and, play calling is that I think it's useful. And I think that there are, schematic, what's the phrase? Styles make fights. Sure. And I think that is a true saying in the NFL as well, right? Like that different sort of philosophies definitely can make for interesting matchups week to week. The trends of how offenses and defensive X's and O's go is very cyclical, and it changes constantly. And even I was looking at numbers for some of the Cowboys stuff, and I was looking at play action rate, I think it was, or it might have been motion rate. I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong, but San Francisco was dead last in motion rate last week. And it's like, that's so against their philosophy normally that you would think that would make some sense. That doesn't make sense. But I just think that the way things change all the time is that this is a real moving target. This is all a very long way of saying, I think that philosophy is, when you're talking about building a team around it and that sort of thing, I think it needs to be built around the play caller, right? I think that's the key thing, is that I think that it's not necessarily just Shanahan offenses that give the Cowboys trouble. It's Clint Kubiak calling a Shanahan offense, right? It's Kyle Shanahan calling a Shanahan offense, right? It's Mike McDaniel calling a Shanahan offense. I think having the right kind of mind who knows how to use that well is important. So to answer your question, would I like to move to a Shanahan offense? I think that there are lots of concepts that are inside a Shanahan offense that I would love to see the Cowboys use more, for sure. But I think that, McCarthy calling a Shanahan offense is kind of a misfit. So I'm interested, if you want to talk about getting an established coach in here who runs that offense, but I'm not just going to get the assistant quarterback coach to Mike McDaniels in Miami, or what I'm saying, I'm not going to get the fourth Kubiak son because he also spells his first name with the K when he's not supposed to. I think you have to have the right person with that to get it correct. And I think it's not coincidental that not every single West Coast coach is having success. I think it's because Matt LaFleur is Matt LaFleur that they're having success. Sure. It's because, Kyle Shanahan is Kyle Shanahan, and Sean McVay can recall, plays from 25 years ago and who screwed up on what. And, I'm saying, I think the philosophy is important, but don't just blindly go pick from the tree and not make sure that you're getting the right coach as well, because I think that is more important, frankly. The person calling the Shanahan offense is more important than the actual, philosophy tree being transcribed to our playbook.
And I agree with everything you said. Now, one of the things I will say is, let's say the Cowboys decide not to renew Mike McCarthy's contract next year. Mm-hmm. I would like to see a coach in here that can really knows how to design a rushing attack. Not like Greg Roman, because Greg Roman doesn't know how to do a passing attack, right? That's the wrong example, right?
It's a good caveat that you got there.
Yeah. Well, but what makes a lot of these smart offensive minds really good is that they can design a rushing attack on top of a good passing attack. I look at Miami, right? I don't think Miami has one offensive lineman that would start for them outside of Teron Armstead, would start for Dallas outside of Teron Armstead at left tackle. And he hardly plays because he's banged up all the time. And yet Miami can really run the football, right? And they did it with a 31-year-old Raheem Mostert last year, who led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. They drafted a Devon Achane in the third round. It's not like they have Saquon Barkley or Bijan Robinson, right? But they have a style of rushing attack that's really hard to defend. And I think you're seeing that with like the Saints, right? Like Alvin Kamara is a 29-year-old running back, and they gashed the Cowboys because they were really good with their wide zone. Everybody was moving at the same time, at the same direction. I love Mike McCarthy's passing stuff, but man, I don't know if he's an expert in designing run games.
I think the modern offensive play caller, that the ones that are good, they're problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
And they use the tools of the scheme to solve problems. Look at what Clint Kubiak did to the Cowboys. We just talked about it, right? Like they had a problem. They knew that they couldn't protect against Micah Parsons if they had to drop back, into traditional drop back situations 20 different times. So what do? They found a solution that exploited the Cowboys' weakness, promoted the Saints' strength, and protected their quarterback. And like they did all of that in the context of their playbook, but their playbook didn't tell them to do that. They had to, be the ones to kind of examine the situation, understand what their team is, understand where the other team is, and then marry the combination of techniques that are inside the Shanahan playbook to help, promote the aspects that they wanted to promote, to dictate how their offense would throw the ball, and to dictate to the defense how they would be defending, and when they would be defending the pass. So again, I do think I agree. I think that, there are things that I'd like to check mark off a list of a new play caller if we're going to go that route next year. But I think the first thing that I would say is obviously somebody who understands a scheme, obviously someone that has a history with successful offenses, but I want somebody who is not just trying to have one offensive solution for all problems. Because I think that's really where we're seeing the kind of evolution of play callers is they're not trying to ham fist this or pick your poison offense. That's the same thing to me, honestly. It's what can we exploit? Here's where we're going to dictate the terms so that we can accentuate our advantages and kind of eschew any disadvantages, hide any disadvantages from the defense.
And this is what makes Andy Reid like one of the best coaches of all time, right? Like you want to play cover 2, fine. We'll design a rushing attack and a short passing game to win. Or if you want to play cover 1, we'll figure out different ways to attack you there. So I think Mike McCarthy, for the most part, is pretty good at designing a passing attack to do that. It's the run game where sometimes they have issues, and it shows up, unfortunately, in a lot of these bad weather games. Like they just can't run the ball when they need to.
Yeah. And I think, again, I think part of it's going to be coordination. Like it'll be interesting to see if things kind of even out if the Cowboys run game gets better, but we're already seeing so many of these running attacks that are already kind of well coordinated, and the Cowboys offensive line issues aren't necessarily tied just to the rookie young offensive lineman. It's partially a coordination issue. So I'll be interested to see if it kind of evens itself out. But I think we've gotten you're right, that in the sense that I think we've gotten a large enough sample size that we could say that it doesn't feel like, in the same way that the Shanahan tree does have a very kind of story tradition of a very solid run game, it doesn't feel like there's anything that the McCarthy offense can kind of hang its hat on the run game at this point. And it really doesn't feel like that's been the case since before Terrence Steele got hurt 2 years ago, I would say. Like that feels like the last time the Cowboys successfully were a dominant run team.
Yeah. I mean, and even then that might be a stretch. I was thinking more like it might be since like 2016, 2018, the last time where it felt like they could run certain things.
They could run to that right side, I feel like, behind Terrence Steele and Zach Martin. But I think you're right in the sense that as far as like being able to do whatever they want in the run game, it might have been as far back as then, as far as like, we're going to run left, right. It doesn't matter. You're not going to stop.
But and to be honest, I don't even think it was a scheme thing. I think it was just their offensive line talent was so ridiculous that they could do it. I think if you go back to like 2014, obviously they had a good offensive line then too. But when they had Bill Callahan on the offensive line, that's when it felt like they had a lot of these, they could do whatever they want on that side of the ball. So, all right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Remember, tomorrow is our crossover show. Friday is a preview show, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.